Hey y'all, it's old Jesse. Um, Today we're gonna do a little religious segment on "Let There Be Satans," um, plural, by the way. Um, I've kind of been requested to show my beliefs on Satan and what I think that is, and I've got a bunch of thoughts written down, but it's not really a chapter yet. It's just things I've encountered in discussion that are kind of talking points, and and I need to write the chapter first of all. But I figured I would go ahead and test the waters a little bit and see what everybody else thinks of my thoughts. If they think I'm crazy or whatnot or whatever, that's fine. Um, so most of this is going to be a discussion. It's not going to be a reading, um, or rather commentary, however you want to say it. It's going to be me being eloquent with my speech. I hope. All right then. So the basic concept of Satan, like the oldest concept of Satan, comes from Judaism. I personally agree with that because the Satan of Judaism is the nations around Israel that hate them. Um, and that's a findable Satan. We can identify and quantify that type of Satan. So I think they're right about that. And and uh, and the Christian version of Satan actually didn't appear until Dante's Inferno was written, and that was like, you know, 1,000 years after Christ or better. So, as in terms of religion, Satanology is fairly new, um, and it's not really a very well thought out concept. Mostly, what happened is during the beginning of the religious Reformation, the Catholic Church said, "Oh, they're getting Bibles. They're going to recognize that we're the great whore," and then turn to the Jesuits and says, "Jesuits, develop a prophetic ideology that combats this, that we can teach everybody so that they don't pay attention to what's written in Revelation." And so they came up with Satanology, and they used Dante's Inferno to base it on. Um, and so that's the whole Satanology thing of modern Christianity is a completely false story. Having said that, it's very compelling. It's a great story, right? But it doesn't match what's written in the Bible, really. I mean, it kind of does, but it really doesn't. And I'll point that out later. Um, so I can understand why somebody would want to believe that because it's simpler to believe in supernatural evil than to blame yourself for everything. But also, it's simpler to believe that there's one supernatural evil rather than many supernatural humans, or not supernatural, but many natural humans that are causing our own destruction. It's easier to place humanity's destructive tendencies, the blame for that, on a supernatural being than it is to say, okay, well, there are some legitimately evil people out there in the world that just love to hurt others. That that makes it somehow nicer mentally, makes the world, paints the, whitewashes the world, so to speak. And the reality of it is there's a super dark side to humanity, and it's really nasty and evil and wicked, far beyond what you would think. And we're not just talking murder, we're talking like, raise somebody up as a slave and mistreat them their whole life, and then turn around and do human sacrifice, and then eat the body, and then desecrate the rest of the leftover corpse, kind of evil. Okay, so there is that in the world. It exists, and we know it exists because of the prophecy in Revelation chapter 17, where the folks that live in Rome are getting eaten even to this day. Okay, we have archaeological evidence of that. So, you know, it's time to take off the blinders on the evil and actually stare it right in the eyes and say, okay, that's evil. I know what it is. Let's get rid of it. But that's just my opinion. All right, now getting back to the subject, I'm going to read a little bit of some of this stuff that I've got written, and then we're going to talk about it. The subject of the modern belief of the devil or Satan, which people call Lucifer, the great dragon, the serpent who was in the garden, the evil one, and a number of other names and connotations to it, has a number of valuable and intelligent and provocative questions to be asked and explored before any concrete belief should be believed about it. Number one, did the serpent become Satan, or did Satan become the serpent? Okay, this is a kind of like a question that I've got for everybody that believes in that. If you believe that Satan was an angel that fell, how did he become the serpent or possess the serpent? Or how did the serpent become him? Because supposedly he's a fallen angel. There's a origin story problem there, like it doesn't match. So if you know the answer to that and you're really sharp on that old Satanology, leave a comment in the comments section. As there is not any biblical proof of an angel becoming a serpent, and there is a verse for a serpent becoming an angel in 2 Corinthians 11:14, then the majority of the modern Satan myths are incorrectly taught and pollute Christianity. 2 Corinthians 11:14, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Now, I will say this, it doesn't necessarily say serpent, okay? It just says Satan, okay? So we'll just leave that at that. And then Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Okay. Well, obviously, that verse says serpent, and, whatever. So get your story straight, Satanologist. Was the serpent or the angel first? All right, then. Moving on into the second logical question. If Satan were the serpent of Genesis, how could it stand? And this is the stereotypical Satan standing question that anti supernatural Satan thinkers like myself typically come up with. Genesis 3:13 to 15. And the Lord said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me. Because we already proved that if Satan is supernatural, it's a serpent. And I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Okay, well, that's the first encounter of quote-unquote Satan. It doesn't say Satan in the passage. It just says serpent or snake in the Hebrew. And it literally says snake. There's nothing special about it. It's just snaky snake, like you would say snake in the normal language. I forgot the actual word for it. It's like nasak or something like that. Zechariah chapter 3 and verse 1. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. Now remember, we already proved that the serpent came first. And later in the gospel, he was able to transform into an angel of light. We don't know that about this right here. But it says Satan was standing when God cursed him to go on his belly. Okay, so that's kind of like a logical problem. You got to fix that somehow and start teaching that right somehow. Modern snakes cannot stand, and it is clear the angel Satan clearly stood. At this point, as human individuals, we need to make a clear decision on whether or not God would lie to us. If so, then Satan can stand. If not, then this must be a different Satan. Even the thought of 2 Corinthians 11:14 saying the serpent was morphed into an angel and then could stand does not change the issue. Even a morphed serpent to angel Satan is still cursed by the curse of "on your belly thou shalt go." The shape has no bearing on the curse. It is the same individual who was cursed. Okay, so you got to realize whoever it was that was in the garden was cursed to go on their belly, right? God didn't put a distinction on what shape that they were in, did he? It's not written there. We assume it, but that's a big assumption. The individual that was in the garden was cursed to go on their belly. Whether that ended up via patriarchal hierarchy transferring genetically to the rest of their descendants or not is a different story, you know. But that's how those things generally happen. I mean, we're under the Edenic patriarchal hierarchy, and we got genetic chaotic lust. So whatever, you know. I mean, and mortality. All right. So next question: if Satan were Lucifer, how was he alive to fight Jesus, or alive for Jesus to see him fall? This comes from the verse that talks about Satan falling or Lucifer falling like lightning. I've got to look that up. Let's take a look, because I need that Bible verse. It wouldn't. It's in Isaiah 14:12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning, and how art thou cut down to the ground? Okay, the New Testament doesn't say anything about Lucifer at all. So it's really not relevant to New Testament Christianity at all. Because that verse was written in Isaiah. Let's get that back open. And to be cut down to the ground means to die. So let's get a greater context on that, because one verse doesn't prove everything. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9. Hell from beneath is moved before thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols. The worm is spread underneath thee, and the worms cover thee. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend to heaven, like he wasn't there in the first place. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, like he wasn't there in the first place. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Well then, that's a thing, isn't it? So that's Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9 through, 15. Yeah, 15 is pretty good, because it says, Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Okay. I need to write that down. All right. Moving on. What that basically does is substantiate the fact that Lucifer was already dead by the time Jesus was born, you know. I mean, he could not have resurrected himself and then just suddenly become another Satan there. That particular Lucifer was dead a long time ago, or that particular Satan, however you want to call it. All right, verse or chapter or blah, 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 blah. Question 4. If Satan was a fallen angel, how could he die? Well, you got to remember, angels are immortal, and we just read a passage that says, Lucifer was mortal. He died. Um, so my question is, and this is a big issue with Satanology: how can you die if you're an angel? You know, it's a lifetime guarantee of immortality. So, you know, there's big problems. If fallen angels can lose immortality, can we? Like, you go through life and you do everything that you could to gain immortality, and then something happens later and you lose it. Yeah, that doesn't really sound like the promised immortality that we're supposed to get. Like, it's a little bit sus. Um, if fallen angels are possibly mortals, then who is to say Satan is not a human being? Well, I mean, really, the only mortal beings that we know of live on Earth. So, and in terms of a biblical context, that's still true. The only mortal beings that we know of in the plan of God live on Earth. So, if Satan is immortal, he has to be a mortal. Or if Satan can die, he has to be a mortal being, one of those that live on Earth. The serpent was mortal, and human beings are mortal, and every other creature that's on Earth is mortal. So why couldn't Satan have been a human being at some point? Okay? Think about it. Or at least a mortal creature, not immortal, not eternal, mortal, dying. Okay. What is Satan's actual length of life? That's a good question, because mortality, you know, you could live for thousands and thousands of years, but if you're still dying, you're still mortal technically, right? So, like, what's Satan's lifespan? Does anybody know? That's another issue with the modern Satanology. Tell me how long Satan lives before he dies. And once he dies, like, because here's the thing is, you know, a lot of popular Christians are like, hey, Jesus died on the cross and then he went to hell and fought Satan and all this stuff happened. It was an awesome battle, man, and all this and that. But none of that's written in the Bible. And if Jesus really legitimately did that, then Satan should have got his butt whooped and died in hell. You know, so that's kind of like, okay, well, how are we getting these resurrecting Satans all the time? And that, like, I want to know if you have that in your Satanology. Give me the answer. You know, um, and generally speaking, what's the length of life? All right. Question number 5. What is Satan's actual domain of rule? Okay, so the Bible defines certain hierarchies in the Bible. God's hierarchy is everything. Jesus' hierarchy is specifically the earth and mankind. Okay, Adam's hierarchy specifically is mankind and the creatures underneath it. A father's hierarchy is specifically over his family. A deacon's hierarchy is specifically over that particular church he's operating in. So these hierarchies in the Bible are very important. The domains of rules are very important, because what happens to the leader, whether or not the leader is condemned, transfers down to those that are are underneath them. They're also condemned. That's why all of humanity got mortality when Adam was cursed. And in fact, all creation started to die when Adam was cursed, is because the hierarchical structure had him as the leader at the top. It's also why that when you're under Christ, because he was judged righteous, that the righteousness transferal can happen. It's the way God sees things. That's the way he wants to do it, so that's the way it's done. Okay. So what is Satan's actual domain of rule? It appears his throne is in Pergamos, a place on the surface of the planet, not deep within it, because the believers of the time were able to meet there. Revelations chapter 2, verse 12. And to the angel of the church in Pergamos write, these things saith he which hath a sharp sword with two edges. I know thy works, and where thou dwellest, even where Satan's seat is. And thou holdest fast my name, and hast not denied my faith, even in those days where Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwelleth. Right? Well, I mean, it says right there it's in Pergamos. That's on the surface of the land. The church was there and everything like that. But by this point, Satan is supposed to have already been in hell and died a long, long, long time ago. Right? So why is his throne right there on the surface if he's in hell and Jesus whooped him into hell and bound him? Right? It's a good question. There's problems with Satanology. It also appears that he has his own churches or synagogues to fight against the sons of God with. Revelations chapter 2, verse 8, and unto the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, which was dead and alive. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, but are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Right? So it's fairly organized, fairly reasonable to understand that Satan was organized and had structure and had rule over something, and it was active on the surface of the planet. So all this underneath the ground, devil stuff with demons and all that BS, that's not biblical. This Satanology says it was on the surface of the ground. All right? And that's an important issue. Like, get your Satanology straightened out. There's problems with it, Number 6, does the Bible support the idea of Satans, plural? I would say yes. Okay? There, you've got the serpent in Genesis, then you've got the standing Satan in Zechariah, and then you got Job's Satan that was walking on the face of the planet, going to and fro in the earth and sacrificing unto God. Then you've got the Satan's throne here, and then you've got the Satan that Peter encountered, and then you've got the dragons in Revelation. Dragons, plural. There's more than one of them. There was more than one great serpent in Revelation. So that's also an issue. So we have a lot of variety of Satans. So I would say the Bible does support the ideas of Satan's, plural. I do not think that the Bible supports the idea of one supernatural, magically transforming, magically resurrecting, magically getting out of hell Satan. That's just stupid. There's too much going on there, and that would be like saying anything that God binds can be unbound. No, that's not the way it happens. God is omnipotent, omniscient, and yeah, and what he says goes. That's just not. It's not gonna. No, It's just stupid to think that God would let something that powerful go against His will. Like, no, that would have been wiped out long ago. All right, number 7. This is a geek question, or a Greek question. Uh, do the languages Greek and Hebrew support the logic of ha and o to specifically specify titles? Okay, so when in Hebrew you say Hasatan, that's the Satan in the language. Whether it's the Satan of a certain person or the Satan of the country or whatever, they're saying the enemy is what that means. Okay, and Osatan, because the Greek borrows a transliteration from the Hebrew, is the Greek version of that. Okay, so these things are just normal words in the language. I don't think they necessarily specify titles, but I have run across a lot of scholars that are like, "Oh, it has the word the in it. It's got to be a title." It's like, "No, that's like saying the door, or I'm going to the bed, or I'm going to the living room." Those are not titles. Those are normal words that I use in my daily life, and yes, I do talk like that. So, I don't think those particular grammar forms have anything to do with titles at all. If I had an enemy, I would not distinguish them with a title. Mm-mm. No, they don't deserve that. And I don't think God does that with his enemies. Well, maybe so. I could be wrong about that in some special cases. But typically, yeah, I don't give your enemy any more power than they need to have. All right. Number 8. Is the Hebrew words Satan and grammatical permutations of it good, bad, or indifferent? Because it literally means the enemy. So I'm just going to list some verses here that were looked up pretty quick. There's probably more, and there's probably even more than that in the New Testament, but we're only dealing with the Hebrew. Numbers 22:22, 1 Samuel 29 verse 4, 2 Samuel 19 verse 22, chapter 24 1 to 3, 1 Chronicles 21 1 to 3, 1 Kings 5 verse 4, and chapter 11 verse 14. Even the Satan of Job only requested God put Job through trials to prove his faith, which is why God agreed. The Satan of Zechariah 3 does not even speak to condemn Joshua the high priest. In some cases, Satan is very clearly good. Others we lack knowledge of, so Satan is neutral. In fewer cases than otherwise would seem to be true, Satan clearly is evil. Okay, so this is pointing out that when you look at the actual passage and what was done, a lot of times it's not like a ton of lies and deception and deceit and maliciousness and evil intent and all this other stuff. Okay, like you would think of. A lot of times it's either neutral because nothing is said good or evil about that particular action, or it's actually good in a way because, like, if your faith isn't tested, then what good are you? You don't know whether or not you're going to be righteous. Or in some cases, like the Satan and the kings, where it's talking about the angel of the Lord being Satan. It's obviously a good Satan. God was punishing Israel. It was a punishment Satan. So there's clearly some distinction in terms of actions, whether or not Satan is a, what do you call that, is purely evil. as a biblical concept. Um, all right, next question. Now that we know that Satan is not consistently good, bad, or neutral in the Old Testament, is it possible the New Testament Satan is speaking of a different existence? Perhaps an organization or set of thoughts or groups of people. The initial lie was, "Thou shalt not surely die." This lie has been taught for as long as human memory is recorded in the teachings of many different religions, both those identified as pagan, Muslim, Jewish, and Christian, in the philosophy of the immortal soul. In this work, the immortal soul has already been discussed. This is in my Foundation of the Elders book, by the way. And sufficiently disproven. When we do have proof of something as a collective group perpetuating the idea. Okay, so this is actually related to the two dragons of Revelation. So here's the thing. Early Christianity did not have an immortal soul theory. Judaism, for the most part, does not have an immortal soul theory. Okay, what I mean by that is most Jewish sects do not believe in an immortal soul. But there are a few, and there are a few ancient writings where some wacky dude came up with an idea and whatever, like that's that one guy, and that's that certain segment of the population over there, like they don't all follow that. And what you'll find is there's a lot of outliers in the writings of Judaism where you've got all these different guys and they argue different viewpoints and they have different thoughts, and some of them are pretty crazy and some of them aren't. But Judaism is not a consistent religion in terms of what everybody thinks at the same time. Okay, Judaism is very fragmented, and what opinion you get from one Jew you could get a completely different opinion from his brother Jew, going to the same synagogue, learning the same things, and studying the same works. They are not at all consistent in theology, except when it comes to Torah stuff or modifications to Torah. That's the law of Moses, y'all. Okay, so I guess I need to look up in Revelation and get the verses on the two dragons. In Revelation, there's two dragons. One has 2 horns, and the other one has 10. And when I read these passages, I think you'll understand things a little bit better, hopefully. The fact that these two different dragons seem to be different organizations. Okay, Revelation chapter 12. This is the first appearance of dragon in the Bible. And I'll just go ahead and read through this a little bit. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried and travailed in birth and pained to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads. Okay, that's more like a hydra. And 10 horns. And 7 crowns upon his heads. Okay, so biblically speaking, creatures are always organizations. This is one big organization that has 7 kings, that's the 7 crowns and 7 heads, and 10 horns, or 7 modes of rulership, let me put it like that, and with the 10 horns. Because the horns in this particular part of Revelation are called kings, later in the Bible. in Revelation chapter 17. So we've got three of those kings working in tandem with other kings. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Okay, so typically the stars of heaven are saints. And so they killed about a third of the saints. When did that happen? Well, early persecution in the church. It was done by the Roman Catholic, or by the Romans. They weren't Catholic yet, I don't think. They, more or less. So anyway. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Okay. All right, that's talking about Jesus. Da-da-da-da-da. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called Devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven, saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. Okay. So, retroactively, after Jesus ascended to heaven, supposedly Satan was thrown out of heaven into the earth, not like gone down and wrestled with in hell. So that whole ideology of Satanology is out. Throw it out. Your church is teaching you wrong. Okay. So and that's just based on this stuff, prophecy. And so let's continue on. All right, so that's one dragon. Let's find the other one. All right, this Revelation chapter 13. And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and spake as a dragon. Okay, this is the second dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Okay, so you have another dragon, another Satan, causing the previous Satan to recover. Okay, and be healed. Let's back up and read a little bit more of this chapter. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw the beast rise up out of the sea, and having 7 heads and 10 horns. That's definitely the previous Satan. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads, oh, look at that, 7 heads and 10 horns, where previously the crowns were on the head, now they're on the horns. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, his feet were as the feet of the bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power. So the beast gets the power from the previous dragon. Okay, enough said. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon earth shall worship him, for whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. Okay, so all that martyrdom and everything like that happened in early Christianity, later on, that's all going to be revenged. Okay, that's the saints' patience. It's not that we're supposed to just not get revenge at all. It's that we wait until the right time. Okay, and then it's fierce and it's quick. All right, but that's being a little bit off topic. So here's the thing: the first dragon created the beast, and the second dragon, after the first dragon was wounded, resurrected it and healed it, because it was just a neck wound, all the way through the neck, kind of dangling off to the side, so to speak. That's a deadly wound. You may as well be resurrecting something if you're doing that. So that's kind of an issue, because that's one of God's powers. It's not, So those are the two dragons, and a lot of other stuff with the dragons and devil and Satan happen in the New Testament. So the issue is, when did Satan breed? Right? That's one of the issues. And then the second issue is how can Satan have that many crowns? Right? How can he be king of that many things? Right? I mean, think about it. These horns are different kings. It says so in Revelation 17. Yeah. Remember the woman who was riding the dragon? That's chapter 17 of verse 3. Drunk on the blood of saints. Da, 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 da. And the 7 heads were 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Okay. Well, I guess I had the interpretation earlier in Revelation wrong a little bit. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, having received no kingdom as of yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. All right, then. So, kings without a kingdom. Yeah, that's kind of important. That would be kind of like the high bishops in the Catholic Church. They're kings with no kingdom. Or maybe the popes, because they're also kings with no kingdom. They have a city, technically, but it's not really very big. All right. So that's kind of the issue, is hey, we've got these 2 beasts. They've got multitude of kings, and for sure the one in 17 is referencing land. Okay. So we have specific areas of the world with one, and then the other one is not identified, probably because it's too dangerous to really know. And then later in chapter 17, we have the flesh of the whore being eaten, and that's cannibalism. So I'm kind of hey man, this part of Satanology is completely busted and broken, because you have effectively 12 kings, right? And cannibalism going along with it. and it sounds like it's describing an organization, not a supernatural being. And if you go back to Daniel and you look at the beasts in Daniel, well, every metaphorical creature in the Old Testament is an organization or nation or what have you. So I don't think that God changed his symbolic pattern of of expressing himself in prophecy. All right. Question number 10. And keep in mind, these questions are not like questions. These are rhetorical questions that I ask. Like, I've already thought a lot of this stuff out. I just have to put the thoughts together. There's no way I'm backtracking on any of this stuff. So don't try to get in the comments and say, "Oh, you're confused. You don't know nothing. You're asking questions." No. I've got years and years of debate on this. This is just notes for myself for when I'm talking to somebody that believes in Satan. All right, question number 10. Is there some correlation between the seed of the woman and the seeds of the serpent and the synagogue of Satan or immortal soul theories? John chapter 8, verse 43 to 45. Why do ye not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word. Ye are of your forefather, or are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father will ye do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. So that really doesn't correlate to the seed of the woman. But if you go to Genesis, it does correlate with what the serpent said, you shall not surely die. And that is a correlation to immortal soul theories. Because if you're technically a soul, you're technically not dead because you're technically immortal. And then you got the synagogue of Satan, which was in Pergamos. If I'm not mistaken, Pergamos is in the Greek area, and the Greeks did believe in the immortal soul. And then this verse obviously points out, the father of lies begets liars. That's the seeds of the serpent. Now, Jesus was obviously speaking directly to Jews at that point, which that's not the greatest correlation for this particular thought. Admittedly so, and I don't want to take that out of context. So, but it does point out that concept is kind of like, that's an issue. If it's been done before, it could be done again by a different group of humans. All right, moving on. Question number 11. Is the serpent in the garden only an allegory and never was real? No. The serpent's absolutely real. The thought in the Bible does use him as a type. He has been used as a type for the Leviathan, snakes, dragons, Poseidon, father of lies, and flesh. The initial snake has never been spoken of as only a prophetic symbol in the Bible. It is not an allegory. Okay, that's my answer to that question. It takes quite a bit of research, but yes, if you look up Satan and you correlate it to everything going all the way through Scripture, those are the exact things that it correlates to: the Leviathan, snakes, dragons, Poseidon, father of lies, and flesh. All right, so here's some extra thoughts. These are we're past the rhetorical questioning stage. We're into some things to think about. Satan does not have servants. The devil does not have servants. The evil one does not have servants, at least not in terms of the word used in the King James Version, servant, which means doulos, and it means slave. There's only one verse which mentions anything kind of like this. The word is for minister or deacon, but can also mean servant in waiting or messenger. Diakonoia. And that's 2 Corinthians 11, verse 13 to 15. For such as are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to the works. So they're basically taking over the internals of church organizations. Having seen some stupid things happen in Christadelphia in my life, I will say that absolutely there are folks that sneak in and then start teaching goofy crap to destroy Protestant religions. And, when you look at the history books, I've got a copy of Waddington's Church History. It's a really old church history book, about 100 years old, and it teaches the history of Catholic infiltration in early church times. So that's definitely going on today. It's the same thing. They sneak in, get somebody in, or get somebody to be compatible because they want money or whatever, and then they'll sit there and wait for 5 or 10 years and kind of gather a following, and then all of a sudden starts teaching something goofy to destroy that religion from within. That was how the Catholic Church grew. That's their modus operandi for the last 2,000 years or so, or 1,500 years or whatever it is. So there's that. All right, that's not finished. Okay, I'm not even through all my writings on Satanology. Well, the lack of Satanology. That's we just got past the questions, and we're right at about 53, 54 minutes or so. So leave some comments in the comment section. I will get to them. I need to finish writing this. I might not be able to do that today, or I might. I don't know. I've got to think about how I want to say what I want to say, and I would like to answer some hard questions before I get to that. So poke some holes in my arguments if you can, and yeah, sounds good. Y'all have a great one.